Hey everybody, Matt Yankovic, Head of Open Source Strategy here at Percona with another episode of the HOSS, that's me, Talks FOSS. Yes, we're here to give you the best in the open source space. Today we've got an extra special episode, so we love it that you've tuned in to watch. Well, Sergey, welcome back to the HOSS Talks FOSS podcast, your second trip in. So I know that you must, either really be a glutton for punishment and love, the pain of being on this show, or I must be doing at least an okay job to get you to come back on. Right? I don't know which one it is. Hopefully it's one that is better for me, which is the glutton for punishment. I know that, this is just an awful experience for everyone. So I hope that this is a little less awful than before. But hey, we're here. Let's talk.
No, it's actually the other way around, because I really thought that I did awful on the previous show. So
this is like your redo. You're expecting to redo. No, it was great. A lot of good feedback there. So a lot of good feedback. But Sergey, we're here to talk again about Kubernetes and the operators, and the progress that we're making here at Percona. I know that we're working on a new launch for our MongoDB operator, which includes sharding and the ability to shard your systems, which is really interesting and cool, and it's a long asked for feature.
Yeah.
So I was hoping maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what we're doing currently roadmap wise with not only Mongo, but if you want to touch on MySQL, and I understand we're also looking at Postgres. Those things would be really awesome.
Sure. So a couple of things, as you already mentioned, we are currently in our latest QA stage for our MongoDB operator, and it's going to be released somewhere next week, and it's going to have sharding support. The previous version that we released for MongoDB was quite interesting, because we released it with sharding support, but it was only one shard. And it was kind of not a bad run for us, but we wanted to have a look and feel of all the structures that we're adding into the operator to support sharding. And now we're finally at the stage where we're ready to say, okay, our Mongo operator supports sharding at full. This is an interesting release, and as I said, it's going to be somewhere next week. Also,
and so on the Mongo operator, you mentioned the one shard support, and I talked with Akira a couple weeks ago specifically on sharding and the difference between sharding and replica sets, and he mentioned the one shard, and he said it's a good way if you wanted to get the structure set up ahead of time, and it makes it kind of enable sharding later on. But if you're already running a replica set in Kubernetes and using our operator, how hard is it to switch to the sharded version?
No, it's super easy. It's just you enable a couple of knobs in the YAML manifest of your operator or your CR object, and you just deploy it. And this is a good point that Akira made, because when you run just a replica set in your Kubernetes cluster, you don't have a single entry point to connect to this replica set. So let's say you have 5 nodes in your replica set, and your application needs to know to which node it should connect, right? You don't have a single load balance in front of it, which is MongoDB aware, right? And when you add a single shard, you automatically add the service which is called MongoS, and it is actually the balancer in MongoDB world which routes your queries where they need to go to which replica set node you need, right? And you don't need to be aware how many nodes you have there and where is your data. It just does the thing for you. That is one of the reasons why we added a single shard support as well.
Okay. Yeah, and with that, in terms of from a Mongo perspective, I know one of the difficult things for people entering sharding, they get to that one. Are we doing a lot of work on shard rebalancing or adding, shard keys later on? Is that something that we're looking at on a roadmap?
We are looking at it in our roadmap, definitely. But for now, we are not doing that. And one of the reasons is our vision and strategy for our operators. We see our operators as the automation tool to provision the infrastructure for your databases. And once you have this infrastructure, you're moving to the next level of database primitives, like create the user, create the database, create the collection set, whatever it is, depends on the database. And it is on you as a user. And what we do is we make sure that your database runs smoothly on Kubernetes. It has all the HA capabilities that Kubernetes provides. Storage is automatically moved here and there. So we're not looking into database primitives yet. But there are some requests, like for example, for MySQL, we received some requests to create schemas, databases, and create users on MySQL itself through the operator, so that you don't need to connect to the endpoint at all. You just do everything through the operator.
Oh, is that kind of like if you had a standard set of users you always want there, make sure they're pre-set up, make sure the database has the objects and the setup that is the basic.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the thing.
And I guess the other way that people could and probably do that in the past is spin up using backups, but that would be a little different than this. That it would be more of a orchestrating the machine with the basic setup that you want. That's kind of like your corporate standard. But I do see a lot of people using that backup as the seed for cluster nodes or other things, or even new systems, because we also see a lot of people moving from production to development. So let's take this production instance, move it down. So I could see that as an interesting, valid option as well. Now, you mentioned MySQL. Where are we on the MySQL roadmap? What's coming up on the on the Kubernetes side for us, on the operators? What's next?
Yeah, for MySQL, we're going to have a release in, I think, in a month or two as well for our Percona X4DB cluster operator. We had a huge release like a couple of weeks back, I think, a couple of weeks back at the beginning of February, released PXE 170, operated PXE 170, and we added finally point-in-time recovery support, which is a big thing. And I think today or tomorrow we'll have a blog post published about the internals of point-in-time recovery, how we build it in our operator, because it was such a journey for us. It would be an interesting read, I promise you. And point-in-time recovery is a pretty big deal, because as systems crash and go down, and getting to that single point is important. Is this built into the automatic recovery, or when you add nodes? So this is all taken care of? It's all automated. Yeah.
Is it turned on by default?
No, we are not turning it on by default, and the reason for that, because you need to set up storage first. You need to set up S3 bucket, keys, and everything. Once you do that, you can enable it. Without S3 bucket, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Okay. And another big thing in the previous release was automated recovery for PXE, because in Kubernetes world, everything is moving so fast and resources are ephemeral, and PXE is quite sensitive. When you have some network glitch, your nodes are losing each other, and as long as PXE provides asynchronous replication, which means all your commits are synchronous on every node. And when you have some network glitch, then you lose the quorum, and your nodes are going into this forever infinite crash loop, so they cannot start back. And we kind of fixed that. We have a good auto recovery tool, which was requested by lots of our users and customers. And now your PXE setup on Kubernetes is rock solid, almost cannot be killed. Yeah, it's a good milestone for us. And looking into the future, we're going to polish a bit our point-in-time recovery. We're going to have support for compressed backups of point-in-time recovery in PXE operator. And also we are going to provide an interesting feature, this support for custom sidecar containers. It would allow users to extend basic operator functionality without changing the code of the PXE itself. You can add, custom monitoring container to your PXE installation on Kubernetes if you don't like VMF for some reason. Yeah, it's a good one.
Very cool. Very cool. And so, we mentioned also we've got Postgres coming now.
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay,
it is the plan. Yeah, it is the plan that we want to provide our users also the same look and feel as we have for MySQL and Mongo. We also want to provide the operator for Postgres, and it is coming somewhere May, June, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna add it there.
So that means you can use the same framework basically for Mongo, MySQL, and Postgres at that time.
Yes.
And similar APIs, similar calls, similar functionality.
Correct. Yeah. At least we expect it to look like that. We'll see where it goes.
No. I mean that's really good and interesting. Now, one of the things that you had asked for, and one of the reasons why we got you back on the podcast so quick, was you're really looking for people who are using Kubernetes to test this out and to try it. So how can people, what are you looking for them to test? What kind of feedback are you looking for?
Well, I believe I can think of two things right now. First one, as long as we're talking about the roadmap, we kind of have the experimental public roadmap on GitHub published. And once you're gonna share this talk with the community, we can put the link to our public roadmap as well. And what I'm looking for there is to first learn what people think about our roadmap and the features that we are going to deliver. And also I would love to learn more about the use cases of some specific features, because we have a lot of requests coming from different places for different features, but there are so many variables that can change the look and feel of the feature, which might work for someone and might totally not work for someone else. Right. That is why we have this public roadmap on GitHub where anyone can go there and write down what he thinks this feature should look like, what kind of capabilities it should provide as a must, and maybe some additional features which are not so important right now at this moment. Right. This is number one. And the second one is, definitely we're now all in into. Well, Percona always have been all into open source, but now we're doubling this investment and we're changing our model to keep open source open, which is awesome. And we're looking for contributions. And I'm not only talking about contributions in the sense that, hey, go and write some code and contribute, but we're looking for the feedback. We're looking for people to running our operators and telling what's wrong with it, what we can enhance, and there are different channels how people can do that. And on GitHub we have a contributing MD file for our operators where people can learn how they can contribute. It's going into Jira and saying, hey, you have a bug. It's going into forum and saying, hey, you can do this much better than this, right? So this is what I'm looking for, and that would help us a lot to improve our operators at all.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, that there's multiple ways for people to contribute. It's not just code. You mentioned use cases. You mentioned providing feedback. Just giving information is often critical to the success of any project. Whether it's this one or other open source projects out there, there's multiple ways to get people involved. So that's an exciting thing, especially for people who don't feel like they're hardcore developers, right?
Definitely,
And we just did we've been running a survey where we asked about our operators, and it's interesting that more than, or actually just half the people said they're already running their databases in production and development on Kubernetes. Another quarter said they're running their development environment. So there are people out there who are using Kubernetes for their databases in production and in development. And so they have experience in what has worked, what hasn't, where they need some more polish, some more help. You mentioned some of the things we're already looking at polishing, but there's this other group of things that are maybe a little dark to us because we don't know how individuals are necessarily running it.
Yeah, this is correct.
And right now, we also know that a little over a third of those who are running Kubernetes in their environment aren't using our operator, or are using our operators. The other 2/3 aren't, or hadn't even heard of them. So we're trying to get more people to try them out, because there's a lot of features and functionality within them to allow people to move quickly, to not have to do all of those back end things, whether it's figure out the point in time recovery setup, or figure out how to set up sharding in Mongo, all these different features. It's often very critical for us to see that.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. If we can get this people involved telling us where we should move, that would be super interesting.
Yeah. And the other kind of interesting thing is, if you look at why people are looking at this, that was one of the quick questions we asked. And the number one answer was they want to enable their developers to self-manage their databases. Right.
Yes.
And that's where, you want as a SRE or as a sysadmin or a DBA or someone managing the infrastructure and having to make all of this work, you want to push off as much of the administrative and the day-to-day stuff to the end user, and enable them to add things and still conform to your corporate standards. And I think that's what our operators and other operators out there enable is that quick, speedy turnaround. But we can only implement what we know are those requirements, and so that feedback is super important.
Yeah. So I think we can now say this out loud. It's what most people are doing. This enabling developers to run the databases is they're building their own DBAS, right? Database as a service.
Absolutely.
Right, and I posted this blog post recently about DBAS and on Kubernetes under the hood. Right, we learned a lot from our users, from customers, from companies that we work with, that they're building their own DBAS, and there are multiple reasons why they're not using clouds. Like they don't want to be. They want to avoid vendor lock-in, or they want to cut the costs. And definitely everyone who's talking about DBAS nowadays, they're thinking about Kubernetes, running databases on Kubernetes. This is like the synonym of DBAS nowadays, right? And we're, as you know, in Percona, we're also moving in that direction. We have DBAS on PMM as a preview. Anyone can download PMM, Percona management and monitoring, and on his own environment, run it there and deploy the databases on Kubernetes with a few clicks. It's awesome, and we're going to invest a lot into that. And in the back end, we're leveraging our operators. So it's an interesting journey for everyone nowadays.
Yeah. And that blog that you wrote was really a good blog for others who are going through that journey, because you talk about the different choices and trade-offs you have to make between, if you're going to use local storage, if you're going to use virtual, you go through a step-by-step on some of the pitfalls and some of the things that you need to consider. And so it would be great, even if we're bringing in other folks in the community who are working on similar DBAS setups, to just sit down and talk about it.
Yes, that is definitely it. And I would be honest with you, I wrote this blog post based on the learnings that I had through talking to our customers, users, or other companies. So it's just the collection of different use cases that we know are out there. And I believe there are more there that we don't know about. And definitely we want to learn about it. So if you're running your databases in Kubernetes, please let us know.
Right, absolutely. All right, Sergey, thank you for joining. And everyone, if you do run your databases on Kubernetes, you're thinking about it, try the operators, give us some feedback, contact Sergey. He's around and he wants to hear from you. You can also reach out to me at thehoss@percona.com. And we can chat more about this topic and others. But Sergey, thanks for joining me this morning, and I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to those new operator releases.
Thank you, Matt, and I really hope I did much better this time.
You perfect. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.